Good afternoon and welcome to our second 10 years, 10 minutes interview of the new season. Today, we are very happy to host Greg Durst, Managing Director, responsible for the corporate development of ILPA, the Institutional Limited Partners Association. In order to make this session as interactive as possible, do not hesitate to ask questions via the Q&A button or the chat function. So let's start. Hi, Greg. Could you please introduce yourself and share with our audience the different missions of ILPA and also the types of members you're currently serving?
Yeah, with pleasure. And Stefan, I want to thank you, Luis and Michaela, for inviting me to participate in one of your 10-minute conversations. I've learned a lot about the Luxembourg market and about how important it is for limited partners, general partners, and service providers through the LPEA team. And so thank you for having me on the conversation. I got involved in asset management in high school and have been very aware of the industry and right into my first job on Wall Street, where I worked with general partners and ultimately was involved in the syndication of highly leveraged loans for the early buyout groups. And since then, since starting my career in 1990, I've been either a practitioner or a service provider in the alternative space for the bulk of my career. I came to ILPA almost 4 years ago to lead our efforts with general partners and the service providers. And it's really a recognition that in order to get done what we want to get done on behalf of our members, that we have to have very productive conversations with those communities. At ILPA, just a little bit of background. We were founded almost 20 years ago. We are the largest and only LP-only association in the world. We are for LPs by LPs. And in contrast to some of our other association brethren, where they have general partners and service providers also be members, that allows us to be very focused on our LP members. Today, we have over 550 members, and that has grown incredibly through just people wanting to be part of ILPA. We have three primary areas of emphasis. So we have the ILPA Institute, which is our brand for our education efforts, which is the best LP-centric education in the world, according to our members. We have what we call Industry Affairs, which has two principal parts to it. It's the standards and best practices that many of your members will know, whether it's the fee and expense reporting template or the model LPA, which we've just released. But it also includes all of our advocacy work, which again, your members will be very familiar with, whether it's in Brussels or on Capitol Hill with Congress or with the SEC. And because so much of the private equity industry really has a history in the United States, it's the US that winds up setting quite a bit of the standards and best practices and is enforced through the Securities and Exchange Commission. I say that as an American that lives in Toronto, but that's not to be US centric. It's just the history of the industry. And then the third piece is what I refer to as engagement. And engagement is where we bring our members together or our members together with the service providers and the general partners. And we do that through a series of marquee events. So our summits where we bring GPs to meet LPs and service providers, or through our one-on-one or one to several meetings with our limited partners. In a nutshell, Stefan, it's really around alignment, transparency, and good governance. Those are the things that really drive ILPA.
Thanks, Greg, for all those thorough details. Like all of us, you certainly had to adapt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. What have you implemented or changed in the meantime?
Well, let me say, like most people, we, in March and April, we had our eyes wide open. We were very concerned about what it meant for our business. And the team at ILPA has, I think, pulled together incredibly well with the support of the board to pivot all of our programming to virtual. And at first, it was incredibly daunting to change the engine on the airplane while it was in flight. To give you a sense, we with 5,500 individuals that are members and 45 plus different events, to be able to pivot those to virtual was quite a daunting challenge. We've been overwhelmed by the response of the communities that we work with. All of our marquee events at this point have doubled in terms of total attendance. So our members conference in June typically has 300 people attend. We had over 1,000. Our legal conference that we're doing in 3 weeks' time had 120 people last year. We're already at 250 registrations. So when you remove the cost of travel and the time invested in travel, we actually find more people can participate. And we're really, really focused on making sure that they have great content that continues to engage them and build also the relationships. And that's a real challenge in virtual, is to build the relationships, but we're trying to do a number of things that helps that process as well. There are a couple of important points here, though, Stefan. Because of COVID, some things are going to go virtual and stay virtual in the private equity, life cycle. We think that things like due diligence and the LPACs are going to go virtual and stay virtual because they're important for governance, but they're not so important to have the relationships around them. And build those relationships around them. There are certain parts that will go virtual and will have a virtual plus in-person element. And when I think about that, on-site education, people really do value the opportunity to learn with others, and particularly for our education, where we bring people together in their own organizations. So we'll have 25 people together from one organization. It's really important for them to be together to do that. But also new manager intros and on-site visits for due diligence. And I would say also annual general meetings, because when an LP goes to an AGM, they do want to hear the story from the GP, but they also want to hear and see their fellow LPs. And they also want to get a sense of what life is like on the ground for either the portfolio companies, but also for the professional staff within the LP.
As you just highlighted, you organize well-recognized flagship marquee events and also training solutions, which you propose to your members. What makes those really special, and what's happening now in Europe from organized by ILPA?
Well, so this is selling ILPA, and let's be clear, that's kind of my role. I sell ILPA. I talk about ILPA all day. There's just something about the ILPA events where we bring together LPs, and that's a big part of what makes our events so special, is that the LPs participate. But they participate in a way with ILPA events because they know that they're going to see a lot of their peers, and it's a great opportunity for them to network. But they also, and I don't know how we do it, but we do it well, they learn a lot and they have fun. And I think that dynamic really does translate for their interactions with the general partners and the service provider community. And let's be very clear, ILPA serves our members first and foremost. And the best way that I can do that is making sure that the general partners and the service provider community have a great opportunity to meet our members, and everybody has a good experience. So the more these communities come together in a productive way, the more I can serve my members. But I call that certain something, Stefan, I call it our ILPA magic dust. There's just something about the way that we do it that brings together people in a way that they learn a lot, they meet great managers, they meet great service providers that help them solve their solutions, and they have a good time doing it. And we jealously defend that.
Looks like an ideal combination. So strong knowledge, big, good business, and then also that fun part. If we now look at the fruitful relationship between LPs and GPs, what have you witnessed recently? Which trends were you able to envisage? And any specific message you would like to pass to our European and Luxembourg community?
Yeah, I'll come to that last part last. Two major trends have characterized the LPGP experience over the last 6 months. One has been a much better foundation of communication, particularly in contrast to the global financial crisis, where I think during the GFC, things were so unsettled and LPs weren't quite sure what was going on because their GPs weren't sharing information consistently. Fast forward 10 or 12 years now, and there is a much better track record of transparency, of consistent communication, and frankly, of trust. So that's been really, really important. The second trend that I would say is the evolution of the LP and GP interactions. Because of the quality of that communication, our members are better at asking for things from their general partners. General partners are better at providing that information. And perhaps more importantly, our LPs have managed their stakeholder communication better in saying, look, we know there's a disruption here, but if you look back at what happened in the GFC, the people that continue to allocate capital to managers through the global financial crisis actually outperformed the peers that pulled up and waited for things to get settled. So they've been much better at communicating with their stakeholders the importance of the long-term nature of private equity. And I think that's been really, really helpful. In terms of how that's played out for the European market, I think there are a couple of critical themes that actually where the Europeans are driving the evolution of the market, particularly around ESG. If I think about our members in the Netherlands and the Nordics and in the UK in particular, those requirements from some of the world's most sophisticated LPs, they're setting the terms of that conversation. And that is slowly but surely being brought into the US. I think the Canadians are quite capable on that dimension as well. But we continue to leverage our European members for their leadership in that. And, we've got a number, Europe is our fastest growing region. Almost 20% of our members are in Europe. And so that's really important for us to recognize their issues around that. In the US, I think ESG is translated primarily to diversity and inclusion. And we have done a ton of work on diversity and inclusion. The current environment around diversity inclusion in the United States in particular is really, really unsettled. But I've been, as a committed capitalist and as a humanist, I have been so pleased to see the business response to say, yes, there's a real problem here. Yes, we have a role to play. And yes, here's how we're going to make a plan to address that going forward. So I would say that in terms of the European market, that leadership on ESG has been critical. But one area that we continue to be monitoring is certainly around AIFMD, right? And what we worry about AIFMD is not that it doesn't add professionalism. What we worry about is that it restricts our members from seeing the best North American managers. And because so many times I'm on the phone with the GP and I talk about our European events, and they're like, yeah, no, Europe is hard. I don't want to deal with all that. And I say, actually, you can deal with it. It just takes a program and an understanding of what the requirements are. But when, that question around AIFMD and any changes there tends to have quite a ripple effect within the North American GPs that is in some ways warranted, but in some ways it just hurts our members in being able to see the best managers sometimes.
Okay, message well noted. I mean, the ESG roadmap, that's exactly one of the questions I wanted to ask you, specifically around the concrete steps you had in mind or that were implemented. And also concerning AIFMD, certainly for the moment, we're also reviewing here in Europe the directive. We are looking on what could be developed further. So to be further discussed with yourselves. But again, point taken, there we have to carefully explain it then to our peers on the other side of the pond. Then.
Indeed.
I think then you were very successful, Greg. We have some questions here. So the first one's coming from Gavin. What is ILPA's opinion on the recent paper on mega fund returns published by Ludovic Philippou?
It's an important part of the conversation. And I think that many of our members have read it and have internalized the criticisms. I think it actually underlines some of our priorities in terms of transparency around fees and making sure that people are getting a good return on their fee load. I do think, frankly, as ILPA, we believe that the private equity asset class has outperformed. And, there are lots of our sophisticated members that would support that as well. Look, we believe that more scrutiny of the industry is appropriate and welcome. If you think about where the public markets have grown over time, it is with real academic rigor, and so we're happy to have Ludovic be part of the conversation. I think there's a lot of academics that would take some pretty strong contrasting views with his, but as I said, we welcome the conversation.
Great. Another question from Laurie this time, and she would like to know what the main aspects for LPs are in order to have confidence in GPs. So which ones could you then highlight here specifically?
It comes to one word: trust. And trust is built, I tell the GPs that I work with, trust is built through 10 touches. And those 10 touches are not just meals and meetings, but they can be articles and, hey, I thought of you when I heard this video and I wanted you to see it. And it takes time to build that sense of trust. So it's not just time in the meetings, though, it's also transparency. It's, often when I deal with our emerging manager groups that work with us, they really do want to see that people have learned from their mistakes and are humble. I think one of the things that's been really powerful about the COVID era, Stefan, is that how human it is when we do all these videos, right? One of my, I'm going to miss the personal interactions and the ability to give friends good hugs and shake their hands. But I'm also been really touched by how human people have been on these calls. And I think that GPs and LPs can use that humanity to their advantage. Perfect example I have is that I was on a phone call with a very senior executive at Goldman Sachs, and he was clearly calling from his bedroom, and his 4-year-old came into the full-length mirror dancing in her underpants, right? I loved it. We all laughed, and it was a great way to see everyone's humanity. So trust is built on transparency, and I think some humanity and potentially even some vulnerability about what you've learned, what worked, what didn't.
Okay, great vision and also values for sure. Any last question, the audience you would like to ask to Greg since he's with us today? If not, would you be able, dear Greg, to do, let's say, a kind of look into the future, how the next 10 years could look like? I think you already mentioned what could remain digital, what could change and be upgraded in the future. What would be an idea here?
Well, look, I think I'm a former consultant, so I start macro and I narrow down. I think that the alignment between capital and beneficiaries and management teams will continue, which means that there will be more tailwinds behind private markets. I think the ability to make long-term decisions and link that to returns for both the beneficiaries and the managers and ultimately the LPs will continue. We have twice as many private companies today as we do public companies. I don't see that changing. There's too much interest in staying private longer, and we're seeing that over and over again. That's the first thing. That's the why. Where do I think it's going to happen? What's going to happen when the rubber meets the road? I think technology is going to play a huge role. And technology is going to enable more standards and more clarity on returns and the disaggregation of alpha and beta. And I think that will have a clarifying role for many folks, which I think is really, really important for the industry, because nobody wants to be paying high fees for beta, right? They want to be paying reasonable fees and have excellent risk-adjusted and net of fees returns. And I do think that technology has an incredible role to play there. So, as I think about what affects our members and what affects your members, it really is working with a number of the technology providers to create and maintain that level of transparency that allows the industry to thrive, which I think it will over time, but also to allow a great understanding of what's going on in people's portfolios and be able to shape those appropriately based on the insights that are offered through great portfolio monitoring.
Thanks, great. You have been very inspiring. Now all the different questions are popping in. Still ready to answer a few ones?
Of course. And if there are questions that we don't get to, they can reach out to me directly on my email at gdurst@ilpa.org, or more questions about ILPA more broadly at info@ilpa.org. So please don't hesitate to connect with us.
Fantastic. So let's shoot then. What is LP's favorite fee structure? If they could give us a wish list. Question from Andreas.
No fee, no carry. Everything looks like co-investment, but they don't want to pay their manager, but they want all the benefits of that active management, right?
Okay, is that realistic now?
Yeah, okay. No, I think it's really hard to say, and it really depends on strategy, right? For, emerging managers, our members know that management fees tend to be high because they want to start a business. They're entrepreneurs. But over time, I think as managers get to higher and higher levels, as they're successful in raising funds, there is an expectation that overall management fees do decline. If I were to summarize it in one phrase, our members are happy if general partners make a lot of money off carry they're really less excited about them making a lot of money off a management fee. And, you know, that really comes back to alignment. So to say that, you know, our members would like a 1% and a 1% management fee and a 10% carry, and to have it, you know, a 10% hurdle, that's pie in the sky. It doesn't make sense for the managers in many sectors, and it doesn't make sense for our members to, you know, you can get low cost at all costs. It doesn't mean you're going to get great performance, right? So I think the more we see on transparency, the more we see alignment in terms of results for managers where they're putting more at risk in terms of carry, the happier our members get. But it's a competitive market, right? They know that the best managers are in demand, and it's hard to get allocations in some instances. And so in some instances, those managers have more pricing pressure than I think our members love, but they will pay for performance.
Completely makes sense. Thanks again for those insights. And a quick last one. We see a surge of family offices here in Luxembourg. How could the LPEA as a national association best support this specific group?
Well, you know, one of the great lines about family offices, if you've met one family office, you've met one family office. And I think that the opportunity for family offices is they play such an important role, particularly with the smaller and emerging managers, where they can really get in early and be influential and make a big difference. And so it's, you know, what I would encourage the family offices to do is to professionalize their process as much as possible. It's often the family offices are, you know, either the family or the individual founder, and they have their own unique processes. It's hard for managers to navigate that. And so I would encourage them to look at the processes that we make available to our members. You know, our members almost, I won't give you an exact stat, but one of our most important segments is family offices, and we want to help them, you know, mature their processes so it's easier for them to find and evaluate great managers.
Great, Greg. I mean, that was really strong session. Thanks again for all your transparency, your time, for that knowledge sharing. Very happy to partner up with you in the future again. And dear audience, also, thanks for your presence today. As mentioned by Greg, if you want to ask him different questions, you know where to look at. And we just wanted to finish now our session of today with a quick snapshot of our next events. Thanks a lot, and see you very soon. Bye-bye, Greg.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.